I'm here with Paul Allin, and Paul's in Australia. I'm in the Philippines. It's lovely to have you here, Paul. Paul is a GP currently, owns a big practice in Australia. But during the Rhodesian War, he was in three independent company, Intake 147. He also was in 4RR and 5RR. So I'm looking forward to hear what he has to say to us. And so, Paul, without further ado, brother, the platform is yours.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the TF service because I don't think it's been really covered. And most of my TF service actually happened when I was at university. As you mentioned, I started off, I grew up in Rhodesia. I moved there when I was only 1 year old, and my parents always lived there, although my father worked all over Africa. And I eventually ended up at Peterhouse because they were living in Zambia at the time. And a lot of us who were expats actually went to boarding school at Peterhouse. And so I was there with the Spanish whites and all the rest of them, the rebels that had already been on this program. And
what house were you in? I was in Paget.
I was in Malvern.
My brother was in Malvern, Andre van Sale. Yeah, he's 5 years older than me.
Yeah, so I think it was quite good being at boarding school. We sort of learned a little bit. We learned how to be cheeky and break the rules and all that sort of thing. Break rules sensibly, actually. And anyway, so when I finished up at school, I got A levels and I was accepted into university and stupidly decided to do my national service first. But I went around. I did a hitchhiking trip around South Africa for a while. And then I missed my early call up and I only got back for the Intake 147 call up. And it was only 9 months at the time. So I thought, well, that's easy. I'll easily make my my varsity call up the next year. But of course, that didn't happen with 147 because we were the sort of one of the intakes that just kept on getting extended. During basics, I did okay, but I actually hurt my knee and then I had to have knee surgery. And the Shepherd Wilson had a go at me. And after that, I could never really bend the knee properly and I was limping around. And so I got medically downgraded. I went up to 3 Indep. They made me a corporal after basics. I think it was probably because I had A levels and I think they weren't used to seeing people with A levels in the army. So I don't think I actually earned that very well. And then, so I got up to 3 Indep in Nyanga and I was the general dog's body there for a while whilst I was recovering. I ran the canteens, both the Troopies canteen and the Corporals Club. I did HQ signals and I sort of learned all the ropes of signaling, even though I was never properly trained as a signaler. They needed extra hands there. So I manned all the sets and soon knew what to do. And after a while, it was pretty tough in 3 Indep. Fani Kutsia was our OC, and it's been talked about with Dave Fremantle's talks and Dave Stedman. He was trying to bash some sense into us and he gave us a really tough time and everyone just wanted to be out in the bush. We didn't want to stay in HQ. So I volunteered to do a lot of relay station work. And I went up to the different relay stations and I think that you can see, I'll talk a little about them because they hadn't really been covered much in these programs to date. And we used about 4 relay stations during the time that we were in 3 Indep. And of course, it's a mountainous area in Nyanga. So comms are very difficult and we were really reliant on relay stations and a lot of it was done manually. We didn't have rebros, those sort of rebroadcasting devices which you could just run automatically. So the signaler had to sit next to a handset and take down all the messages and then pass them on. And if we had, say, the scouts coming into the area, had to do all those shackles and everything for the frozen areas, it was quite a job. Anyway, the first relay station was call sign 38, and a lot of people would know 38. It was up near World's View, and it had a sort of wooden hut there, which we actually called the hut. And we would go up there for a couple of weeks at a time, sometimes 2-3 weeks. And until we had 2.5s, you had to walk up the Gomo there, and it was a real pain in the butt. But after the 2.5s came along, they could get up those stone terraces. They were really steep, and we were able to sort of not have to go and fetch all the kutunda from down the bottom there, especially the radio batteries, as they were the heavy things. After a while, when 3 Indep moved to Hondi Valley, that relay was obviously useless. So we then had to set up a relay station, and the guys were working around in Aberfoyle tea estates in that area. And so myself and a guy, our pronto there was a Sergeant Brown, And we went scouting around looking for relay stations for weeks on end, and we managed to put 2.5 through rotten bridges, and we got bogged in a forest for a whole day and spent the night overnight there, just sitting there in the forest. It was really cold. And eventually we found this relay station on the top of a gomo called Mtaka. And we could get a 2.5 up to there, but it was really steep. And we just put a tent there. It was a really flimsy structure, and there'll be a photo of it. And we spent weeks on end up there. But what was quite nice was that you saw all the action that was going on in the Hondi Valley. You know, there were a couple of scenes where we had hunters coming in and all that sort of thing. And I not only got to hear the comms, but also see the action. And it was really good fun. It was like being in a movie. You know, seeing that the hunters would come in like little jet planes on darts, and then you'd hear all the explosions. Anyway, with 3.8, we had to give up that relay station because it was called 3.8 Alpha, because the wet weather made it impossible, and we had to be flown in and out with choppers. So they decided to just leave it there. And I packed it up, in fact, and we moved it to where 10RR had a relay station, which was actually at Hondi View, and that overlooked Ruda. So that was also a really interesting relay station, because that relay station had quite good comms over the whole of Hondi Valley, and we used to do a lot of work for nearly everyone who was in Hondi. And in fact, when that famous contact took place, Hill 31 with the RLI, I did all the initial relay station work for that, and I actually watched the whole scene unfold. It was quite far away, and it was all just choppers flying around and lots of K-car noises and things like that, but it was quite an honor to be there. I really enjoyed that. After a while, 3 Indep moved into Tunda TTL, and Tunda was sort of off to the north near Allin Mission, and we had no comms there. And so we tried to use the old 3.8 hut. It didn't work, and the comms were just really, really poor. So our battle captain, a fellow called Captain Errol Mann, he said, move 3.8 to the RBC radio mast. And I don't know if you've ever been in Yanga, but you could always see that like a twinkling red light in the distance, over there, far in the distance. And that was where the RBC mast was. And that was on a hill called Rhodesian. And it was the 3rd highest point in Rhodesia. It was bloody cold up there. And the police had it as a relay station for quite a long time. It was called Alpha 1. And anyway, so I moved, I was the lucky signaler to move 3.8 to Alpha 1. And I joined up with the fuzz call signs there. But I had to climb up this bloody radio mast to put the coax and the dipole up there. And it was just in mist. It was total booty and wet. And I had the dipole in my teeth, and I had the coax under one arm, and I climbed up this bloody radio mast one-handed. It was the most precarious thing I've ever done in my life. And then we hung the dipole up the top of them, well, probably about halfway up the mast. And we had 5 comms everywhere there. It was fantastic. Anyway, I was up at that radio relay station when 3 Indep got their 100, they broke their 100 kill for the year in 1976. And it was quite an experience, because we sat on 99 for ages, and we had 99 kills for 3 Indep Company in 1976 for probably about 4 weeks. And we were all thinking, well, are we going to get it there? Are we going to get it? And they promised us champagne and things if we got to 100. But whilst I was up there, we had a contact, and we got 2 kills, and we got 101. And there was meant to be champagne from Brigadier McIntyre, but Brig Mac never gave us that champagne. It was all a bullshit story. They did it just for the crowd, to please them. One of the things that I've got a photo of the radios at Rhodesian with Alpha 1, because we actually eventually combined the signalers from the police and the signalers from 3 Indep actually worked together, because it was easier to man all the radios, and we didn't have to do so much. So I took a photo actually of all the radios that we had there, which I think you'll put up, John. It shows from left to right, there's a A76 and A60. Those are the 2 army radios on the top on the left. The police radios are a Becker, a western, and an overland. And you can see in that photo that I'm having a smoke, and there's a cigarette pack of Madison cigarettes in it. So, you know, it was taken at that time, and we were all working together with the police, and it was really busy. There were contacts happening all the time, and we were calling in landmines, and we were incredibly busy on that station. The other thing I did there was I set up a rebro, and I'm pretty sure it was used by the scouts and the SAS, because all we had to do was keep the rebro going. We never ever transmitted on it. And I think that because it had such good coverage into Mozambique, it was used by some of the special forces. So I was quite proud about all of that, because it really worked well as a relay station. After I finished, you know, what happened was intake 147, we started off with 9 months, then we got to the 11 months, and then they made it 18 months. And after 18 months, they then put us on continuous call up. So we ended up joining 4RR, and we did a few more months, and we were up at Mukumbura. They moved us up there. It was a bit of a letdown, in fact. We do cover it in the 147 book, the Never Fear book, because we went from having quite good gear like 2.5s and 4.5s to using old Bedford RLs and old radios that never worked. And they just chucked us on the cordon sanitaire up there at Mukumbura. One of the stories I want to tell about that trip was we got put on a charge if we got malaria. I don't know if you remember that, because they said you weren't taking your pills, because they used to say that the pills made you impotent, or you know, you weren't as good in bed if you took those malaria pills. And there was that story went around. Anyway, so we all got bloody malaria up there, and you know, but we caught it quite early because we were quite wary of it, and we knew. But quite a lot of us were quite crook with it. Well, that's an Aussie expression, quite ill. And they wanted to charge us, but I used to line up with medics, and we used to throw all the pills down the throat at the parade every day, down their throats. And I soon realized that when I started medicine, I realized that what happened was we were getting chloroquine-resistant malaria, and what was happening is that even though we were taking chloroquine, the malaria was resistant to it, and we were still getting malaria. So that was the first time I think it happened that it was described. Another thing happened that was funny at Mukumbura was we had the 5RR mortar guys there, and we got this message from one of the keeps that the Terps were going to stonk us, you know, and so the 5RR mortar guys, they set off a few mortars, you know, during one stand to, and then we had a practice run where we all had to hit the trenches. We didn't know when it was going to happen, but they all called us and said, got to hit the trenches. And every single one of those 5RR guys, they hit the trenches, they had their webbing on, but they were bloody stark naked. And I think they did it on purpose, because us national servicemen, we looked at them, we said, you bloody idiots, man, the place is full of mosquitoes, they're going to bite you down there. Yeah, so after Muckers, I then got called up. I then got released, and I had to fight to get released. Even though I was released, I had my acceptance into Yale Medical School again, because that was the third year that I've been accepted and I hadn't been released. And they weren't going to let me go, and I really fought it. And eventually they said, okay, you can go. But I had to get from Mukumbura to Salisbury, you know, no transport, no bugger all. It took me 4 days. I got stuck in Mount Darwin and I couldn't get a lift. And I started my course late. They thought I wasn't going to come, you know, and I nearly lost out again. So, you know, the army nearly won again there. Anyway, so when we started med school, it was really interesting, actually, because there was quite a weird group of people. And I know this is a bit off topic, but a lot of us were ex-national servicemen, and because nobody at that time was allowed to go to university unless they'd done national service. And quite a lot of the guys were actually MA3s, they were medics, and they were doing they were training, they had these cadetships where they could go in the army or the Air Force, and they could, they were paid as lieutenants, actually. So they got quite good pay compared to the rest of us. And they had to then commit to pay back the time afterwards. So we had quite a few guys like that. And so there were 3 groups that were in our med school class. We had about 70 people. There were the girls that are straight out of school. And I tell you, they were shell shocked when they saw us. We were this group of army guys there were probably about 20 of us had been in the army. And there was another group of Africans who had basically got scholarships in that. And we were full of rubbish. We were up to mischief the whole time there, because we sort of formed a gang. One of the guys that was with us in our class, I mentioned a few names, was Gary Stack, and I really looked up to Gary. Gary was one of the first SAS national servicemen, and Gary had a few bad experiences in Mozambique. He was involved in a scene where his stick leader got killed, and two of them single-handedly took on a group of about 30 Frelimo, and they managed to get away. But Gary definitely had post-traumatic stress disorder. We sort of picked it up afterwards. He was always a bit punchy, and you had to be careful around him. And but it was a really good guy. But it actually got him at the end. It was really sad. After he qualified as a doctor, he struggled a lot, and eventually he died a young man. It was sad. So anyway, we got up to all kinds of mischief in the medical school. I'll tell one of the funny stories. The only sort of things that the army guys could do. Up at the main campus, they had a lot of the black students were up there. The Africans were up there, and we were down. The medical school at Godfrey Huggins Medical School was separate. It was down in another part of the university campus. And one day we put a whole lot of signs up on the main notice boards up the main campus saying, sperm donors wanted for project, bring sample in jar, $5 paid. Come to the physiology lecture room at 8 o'clock on a Monday. It was just when that was exactly at the time we had our physiology lectures. And anyway, that Monday, there was a queue, must have been about 100 people with their jars all standing there. And it was all a bit of a hoax. There was nearly a riot, but in the lecture room, we were laughing till we cried. It was just the sort of prank that we would do. Anyway, so what happened during Basti, we were all still called up, every small vacation, every, the long vacation, particularly December to January, end of January, beginning of February, the army just grabbed us and we would go on a call up. And by then, because I was based in Salisbury, I was moved to 5RR. And what happened is that I soon realized that everyone thought if you were a medical student, you were almost a doctor, Meantime, we knew bugger all, we knew nothing. Honestly, I was dangerous. I knew nothing about bloody looking after casualties and everything. So when I was on call out, they kept on asking me to be a medic. And I said, "No, look, I don't know anything, man. I know bugger all." So I actually asked to do the troop medics course, and it was just a short, at KG6, we just did I think about a week. That I think it was about that long, where they taught us to just put up drips and use shell dressings and airway management and all the basic stuff, stopping bleeding and that sort of thing. And after that course, I then thought, well, I still know bugger all.
Could I just interrupt you there for a second? In RLR, we had training, medical training, but I mean, we learned how to give each other. We each had a thing of Ringer's lactate with a giving set. We each had our own syringe of morphine hanging around our neck, and we could. As normal, all the troopies in RLR, we learned how to go. Okay, I don't remember us doing chest drains and things like that, but we were able to deal with we could do tracheotomies and sucking chest wounds.
Put the needle in, and you also could plug the holes if you had a leaking air. Yeah. So that's the sort of stuff we did. And then what I did is I was still worried about my skills, so I went and did quite a lot of suturing and putting up drips and resuscitating people in the Harare hospital casualty over weekends. They were always happy to have another hand there, and we were a bit sort of slow and pretty clumsy in the beginning, but I soon got better at it. And that stood me really well, because after that, when I did a couple of on the long call-ups with 5RR, and I'll talk about one of them. I think in my notes I told you it was a call-up from hell. I was considered as a medic there, and I did everything as the medics did. I was carrying all the gear. I had the loot, Sosagon, all that sort of stuff. And what happened, and I think, I read somewhere, I think the name of this guy was Dudley Wall, he put up something on a chart of the casualties during the war. And, and it showed the percentages. I'm not sure it was sort of injuries or fatalities, but he said the BSAP had 25%, INTAF 16%, and Rhodesia Regiment had 12%. Whereas like the RLI and SAS were like 3-5%, something like that, So I looked at those numbers and I thought, I'm not bloody surprised, because you know what happened when I did this call up at 5RR, and we were, they would take us, I've been in Civvy Street for 9 months. And, you know, although we still, you never forgot your skills, you know, you knew how to handle a weapon and all that stuff, but you got rusty. And they took us and they put us with a group of people we'd never been with before. And you all just put into troops, you know, little gangs of whoever, you know, that you wanted to go with. And they took us for a couple of days on a range. We'd go and shoot our weapons, get used to them again and zero them in and all that, and run around a little bit to make sure we weren't unfit. And then they chucked us in there. And this time we went down to Sengwi. You know, Sengwi TTL is down at the bottom near Gonorrhoea. It's down in the southeast. And it was a liberated area. And what liberated meant was that basically the Tours had run the place, and the army had given up on it. And they weren't even patrolling there. And they sent us in there to go and sort it out, you know. And man, it was, the worst thing about that is you just felt like you were being hunted. You know, every Mujiba, that's the informers, every local was informing the terrorists what you were doing. So we soon learned you either went out there and were brazen about it and hoped you got sort of invited into a stonking or something, or you went totally clandestine, and we opted for both methods. But on that camp, I fixed up a lot of people. We had our guys injured. We had a lot of Mujibas that were shot. And, you know, and Gooks, the whole lot of tours I fixed up as well. And I wanted to talk about one particular chap that had been injured in a contact, and we got, I think, a few there. And I was called in. I wasn't in the contact, but I was called in afterwards, and there was a bloke that was injured there when there was a terrorist, and we didn't know he was a senior terrorist. But we saw around him, he'd had a notebook, and he'd torn this bloody notebook into shreds. And I started picking it up and said, look, this guy's he must be a main runner. So I patched him up. He had quite a few holes in him. And we called in a chopper because when SB found about that, they said, no, we're going to get this guy. We want him to take him back to Cheredi, I think, or they might have taken him to Baluta. And anyway, the chopper come in and picked him up. But all these bits of paper went everywhere with the chopper's air wash, and the SB bloke said, no, we want you to pick up every single one of those bits of paper. And so after we did the sweep to clear the area, we then had to go and get all these scraps of bloody paper, and they were in trees, bushes, bloody all over the place. And eventually we found all the ones we could. And it had all the information. It had like their rifle numbers, who they were, the names, all that stuff. And we could see it was really valuable. And it turned out this guy was a political commissar. And, you know, he was a really serious capture for us. And anyway, so the next day I was walking around and I found a piece of paper, and you'll put it up because I've sent you a copy of this. And it's this piece of paper here. It was just a loose one lying around. And in fact, it's still got his blood on it. It's got a fingerprint with blood. And it actually reads here, I'll leave the name out. It said, Comrade so-and-so lost his life when he exploded an anti-personnel mine. His legs were cut off as well as his stomach. His gun number 220-16353 SAR was cut into pieces. His banderia, as he spelled it, bullets were exploding, as well as his gun. The time it happened, the enemy vehicles were advancing across the minefield road. The pieces of his gun, we didn't get the chance to take them as well as his body because of that. So I thought that was quite an interesting thing, and I kept it because I was meaning to hand it into SB, but we never got the chance. You know, we moved on after that, and they didn't come back. But that call up, I'd really knocked me around. I'd never been so shit scared for such a prolonged period in my life. It was really not good, and I think our training wasn't really up to the task. And you were like sitting ducks, really. And I know we're not meant to be talking about that, but the reality was it was exactly what happened. If I didn't, I really drew on my basic training and all the training we had at 3 Indep there to try and survive, and we had quite a hard time with it. And I was so glad when that ended. That was 3 months of hell. And 5RR was based down in Sengwi and near Malapati and Baluta for quite a long time. And in fact, my next call up I did there later on, the second one I did, down that part of the world, we were in Gonarezo. We were based at Malapati, and I did that in November or December of the following year. And again, I was a medic, and there were two of us. We had two troop medics. One was an MA3, and I was a troop medic. But by then, I was pretty honed. I knew what I was doing, and so we often would take turns in patrolling and going out with the patrols and being near the different commanders. And one of our jobs there was an operation called Op Gazani, and Gazani was a chief, but he obviously moved out of the area, and he still had a house in the area. And there was a big base camp that we got in that was in the area. And again, this was a liberated area. And it was very, very tricky to operate in. Anyway, so what happened the one day was we were all looking for this base camp, and we were scratching around and following score. And at that time, we were in integrated units. We were with two RAR, and we worked in bigger sticks. So we were mainly about 8 people, sort of double sticks, because the tours were wandering around in groups of 30 or 40, and it just you'd be totally outnumbered. So and so we would snibble around out there, and anyway, one of the call signs got into a contact, and they found a base camp. But it was actually a funny thing, because they spotted the guys, and their G gunner was an RAR guy, and he heard the group talk, and he realized what was going on before they saw them. And they smelt obviously the cigarette smoke as well, I think they said, and they was too hard to get to them, and they eventually climbed a gomo, and they got round, and they shot at them from above, and they shot they initiated the contact with a 42 Zulu. I don't know if you remember those rifle grenades. And yeah, and the fella forgot to pull the pin out, and he actually hit the blanket that they were sitting on. And I actually kept this afterwards. I got these are the warning signs that you have on the 42 Zulus. It says, caution, do not remove safety pin from fuse except immediately before firing. Anyway, the guy, he actually he fired it without that, And so I actually kept these from another scene where because we never left anything lying around, and so I put them in my pocket. I've still got them now. On that contact, they shot up a guy, and they called me in. I was probably about 3 Ks from them. We heard it all going on. There was a hell of a lot of noise going on, and a lot of firing and everything. And so we were called into the area, and because they'd injured this chap and they got a capture, they wanted me to come in and fix him up. And he was quite shot up. He had about 5 bullet wounds. And anyway, we really struggled to get into the area. The bush was so thick, and it was full of ravines and stuff. And although you thought you were close, it took us forever. And eventually they brought in a doctor with a chopper, because we were stuffing around so much, and I didn't even get to see the guy. It took us about an hour to just cover a couple of Ks. Anyway, he also turned out to be a main runner. We were very proud of ourselves. So we did that trip at that whole time we were there. We got quite a few contacts, but the worst thing that happened to us was tick bite fever. And I wanted to tell a story about Cliff Webster. People will know Cliff. He was the RLI doctor, and Cliff was based at Balahuta at the time. And Malapati and Balahuta are quite close together. And 5RR was based at Malapati. And so we had half the guys down with tick bite fever, because we were being bitten by ticks so much that just about everyone was sick with it. And we ran out of doxycycline or tetracycline, what we used to treat it with. So I went over to Cliff, and I asked him, look, sir, can we have some tetracycline? And he had heaps of it. He had bottles of it they used to have these little, like a caravan that he used. And he told me, not a stuff. He said, piss off out of here. I think he said, you wanker. Anyway, so I said goodbye. And they eventually actually dropped it into us. We had a chopper drop, a Paradac dropped it. We had a DAC drop a whole lot of tetracycline, because half our guys were down and we couldn't function anymore. And I don't know if anyone else had been at Malapati, but I want to tell a story about the goat at Malapati. There was a billy goat there that used to eat all the cast-off rations out the shit pit, and it hung around there. And this thing used to be very aggressive. If you challenged it, you just had to look at it and it would charge you. So the guys soon learned this, and we had a lot of fun with that bloody goat, because we got a bit bored. You go and wrestle the goat, And but they had this stink about it. You know, billy goats have got this real pong, and it sort of rubbed off onto you. You know, after you've been wrestling with the goat, you just stunk of this stuff, and you had to have a shower. And you know, I find that smell in anything that's goat now, goat's cheese, goat milk, goat anything. I can't eat it. It just makes me nauseated. And that's because of that bloody goat at Malapati. Anyway, it's a bit of a laugh. I want to tell a story that actually happened, and I don't know why I got involved in this. And I still can't remember the full details on it, but it was also quite an unusual story. We, whilst I was at 5R with Malapati, one of the medics at Mabalauta got shot up, and he was one of the recce medics. And they said, no, they need a medic because they can't work without a medic. So I stuck up my hand. I said, I'll come along. And they did and I only did one op with these guys. And they were all mad. I don't know, they were all full beards, bush happy, absolutely preferred the bush to being in city street. And anyway, we were only a stick of about 5, I think, or 4. And we went and did an op where we went through into South Africa and were picked up. Now, what actually happened, and it was a bit I found it a bit incongruous, because what happened was we drove in mine-proof vehicles, 20, 30 km/h maximum, there was a keep there, I think it was called Chikwara Keep. It was right on the Limpopo. And then we debussed there and we snibbled off into the bush, and then we crossed the Limpopo, and it was just a big sand river at that time. It wasn't flowing. And we anti-tracked and walked where the gang were in that. And then these SAP came with a Land Rover, and the stick commander got in the front and I got in the back with the other guys, and we had a Shangaan tracker with us. I can remember that. And we were all fully kitted up and everything, and they bloody drove at about 80 km/h on the dirt roads without a landmine proofing on their Land Rover, bugger all. And they took us back into Pafuri. And I thought, this is stupid. We were actually only a couple of k's away from where we were driving, as though we were going to be hit by landmines. Anyway, they took us into Pafuri, and we based up there for the night because we were going to deploy the next day. And these SAP guys, they couldn't get enough of us. You know, we had intermediate rounds, and we had no rands, of course, but we swapped intermediate rounds for beers and smokes. And we had a huge piss up. I remember being so drunk, I thought, God, I'm going to be terrible tomorrow. You know, we had to go and walk in the next day. And the SAP boys just couldn't get enough of us and our war stories. And they went on until about 2 in the morning. And anyway, the next day, they took us in this landy again, and we went somewhere down into Kruger Park, and we crossed into Mozambique there, and we did I don't know, probably about a week in Mozambique. Had to be totally self-sufficient. And we were looking at something, there was a staging station or something there, and they just did an OP on it. And that was quite interesting, because I thought it was actually a bit more fun than being shot at and bloody walking around being ambushed. You know, if you did these externals, you snuggled around and you were trying not to be seen. It was a lot easier. So, but I only ever did that one, and I can't say it was anything special to do that. But it was unusual, because I don't know what the hell, who they were, whether they were 4RR recce or 5RR recce. I don't know if 5RR had a recce bunch, but I didn't enjoy being with the blokes because they were just crazy. They were mental. We were carrying AKs and RPDs, and because we were all blackened up, and I remember that 100%. And I think it was probably because if we were caught, it would help decoy. You know, if you were carrying different weapons, you know, with their weapons, they would take. They would do a double, take a couple of seconds to recognize who you were if you got sort of caught. I wanted to talk about a guy called Clive Long, because there was another guy that, I'll come back to Cliff Webster, but there was another time when I was on that same call up in Malapati, where one of the sticks had been pinned down, and they got really badly shot up all day. They'd been having this skirmish where the guys couldn't move from where they were, so much so that they had to get more ammo dropped in. And it was funny, a prawl came along, and I was actually quite close to it where I could hear it going on, and I saw the plane. And this prawl dropped this ammo off to the guys, but they also dropped them tin peaches and a whole lot of stuff. And the guys, you know, it's funny in those situations, they didn't want to know anything about the tin peaches. They just left them there. They just wanted the ammo. Anyway, this guy called Clive Long, and he was a schoolmate of mine. He was in Malvern in the same house with me. And he got a shrapnel wound to his neck. And you know, of course, we were always taught neck wounds are the most dangerous. And he got a big hematoma. He started collecting a lot of blood in the neck. And we thought, whoa, this is no good. And it was already getting dark and we couldn't casevac him. So I was lucky because I had signals experience. And so I was able to set up a TR-48. When we got we called up the jock at Rhodesia, and they had a doc there, a chap called Roger Blaylock. And Roger was I think he worked for Anglo-American at the time, but he was quite involved with the war. And anyway, he told me, you know, what to do. And I sort of gave them advice over the, you know, just to what to do and what to look out for with his airway and all that sort of thing. But he was chopped out the next day, and it turned out it was okay because nothing really happened. And he joined us again about 3 years, 3 days later. And the funny thing was, both when I finished when I left Rhodesia and I went down to South Africa, I joined a hospital with Anglo-American called Ernest Oppenheimer Hospital. And who do I meet there but bloody Cliff Webster and Roger Blaylock? They were both, and Cliff wasn't even a qualified surgeon there. He was working under a guy called Ray Dawson, who was also quite a well-known general surgeon who worked in Rhodesia. And I moaned to Cliff, I said, I remember you buddy were mean with your tetracycline with me. And, you know, and I pulled him up about it. And he couldn't remember it at all. He just said, no, I have to look after my own guys. We didn't care about you. Anyway, and I told Roger about that neck injury, and he actually remembered it. He remembered me calling him. So it was quite interesting. It was a few years later. Well, the last call up I did was with the elections, where we guarded a keep, you know. Didn't matter that I was bloody writing exams. They called us up, and I'd had to do 2 weeks around election time, and we guarded a keep. And, you know, at that time, and we were armed to the teeth. I don't know why we didn't know why we had so much ammo and everything. We were really, really armed. And I was with 5RR, and we guarded this keep, and we could see there was no one in there. We just thought it was a lot of bull, because there was certainly no terrorists in there. They were all either kids or old people or women. And, you know, they were so-called, all the terrorists were meant to be rounded up and sitting in these keeps. It was a whole bullshit story. And when after the elections were held, we thought we were maybe going to take them all out, but we just got stood down, and that was it. It was the biggest fizzle in my life. You know, election defeat, the ANC got in, and we were told, go and hand in your kit, you're done. And I went back to university and finished off my medical course, and that was it. What I want to talk a little about now, John, is just a little bit about some of the demons that we all got. And I know that Barry Zwarenstein's talked about it. Barry was a medic at 3 Indep. I too had a time where I just avoided talking about the army. I didn't read any books. I didn't want to know anything about the guys that were there. And you know, the whole thing was, I found a bit traumatic, so I just sort of ignored it and just got on with my life. And it took me a long time until I sort of worked out, yeah, this isn't too good, because I started getting flashbacks and nightmares, and, you know, running around in a contact without a weapon and all that sort of stuff going on. And I thought I had post-traumatic stress disorder, but Barry reckons I had what he calls comac stress. But it certainly wasn't a very nice feeling, because I didn't sleep very well for ages. And I got over it, and I got over it by writing it all down. And I wrote 2 books. I wrote this book, which was called Drink the Good Wine Now. And it was an autobiography. I actually just wrote it for my kids mainly. And I self-published that, and I sold about 300 copies of it. But I wrote down a lot of that sort of stuff in there, and it helped me get rid of a lot of the rubbish in my head. And I'd encourage people who feel like that to maybe come on the program and talk a little bit about what they did. And also to maybe contribute some of the articles that are being written about on Facebook and the military pages. It helps heaps to do that. One of the other things I do, and I mentioned that I'm now working as a GP in Australia, and one of the things I've always done is support veterans here. And I do quite a lot of veterans advocacy, mainly helping them get their compensation through. A lot of these guys were commandos and people like that who had been in Afghanistan or in Iraq, sometimes East Timor, and they've been, you know, either reached their time in the military or the Navy, and or they've been mentally boarded. You know, they've been basically found to have PTSD or depression or something like that, and then they're kicked out of the military. So I've just helped the guys do the transition from military to civilian, and I've helped quite a lot of them deal with PTSD. The organization that Barry works with is called Open Arms, but I generally just do it as their doctor. So a lot of these people live in my area, and I've helped them overcome it. And I just want to talk about some of the non-medication techniques that people can use to overcome PTSD. Barry talks about hindbrain, front brain, and I really like that concept. It's really a fantastic concept because it basically, it's really the hindbrain is your subconscious brain, and your front brain is your thinking brain, your conscious brain where you make decisions. When you have PTSD, which is basically an anxiety state, the subconscious brain takes over and it starts ruling the roost. So you start feeling feelings of anxiety, you get behavioral stuff like you withdraw from social contact, you might get panic attacks, you might get angry easy. People often self-medicate with a bottle, which is never a good thing. And what's happening is the subconscious brain is taking over, and your conscious brain needs to be brought back in to be the boss. So what we do is we teach people how to actually get the conscious brain back into functioning and making you actually be in charge again. Barry talked about cold water therapy, which is really good, hopping in a cold shower. So if you're having a panic attack, one of the best things you can do is do something that you don't like to do. So hop in a shower and give yourself a shock, because it tells the subconscious brain, basically, get off my back and I'm in charge now. And you don't obviously do it till you're hypothermic. You just get in there for 30 seconds. It's good. But we also teach people breathing techniques, and there are quite a lot of breathing techniques which are basically yoga based. There's one called the pranayama technique, which is well, there's 3 or 4 techniques, but one of them is the alternate breathing through the alternate nostrils. It's all available on the internet. You can pick up that stuff. But what that does is it calms the mind. And again, it's about conscious mind helping you. There's also something called mindfulness, and we're teaching quite a lot of mindfulness. And I sometimes hate these terms because, if I ask you what mindfulness means, you probably say, what the hell? I don't know what that means. Mindfulness is actually just living in the present moment. It's like living right for this moment you're in right now and ignoring everything else. So don't let your thoughts intrude. You've got to actually shut the thoughts out. You've got to say, what am I feeling right now? And it's about being conscious about your heart beating, your breathing, trying to get all thoughts out of your head, because people who have anxiety have their thoughts race around in their minds, and they find it hard to shut it off. So trying to teach people how to shut off their brains is a really good technique. So that mindfulness, you can also Google it. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about it. I also teach meditation techniques. The Eastern cultures have got a lot of good stuff about meditation. The Buddhists particularly, they try and get their brains to divorce themselves from all conscious or worldly thinking. Anything that's going on around you, you've got to really stop thinking about it and try and get an empty space there. And it takes training to do it, but it certainly calms you down. And meditation is very good. But I also tell people about prayer. If you're spiritual, prayer is a very good thing to make you actually come back to your senses and to realize, your conscious brain's back in charge. There's another area as well, John, that I do a lot of work with, and that is sleep hygiene or sleep stuff, because people who have PTSD often really say the nights and they're the worst. That's the time they have the hardest time. And, and I teach people how to actually sleep properly or not worry about sleep. We all know from being in the military, you can power nap for weeks on ends, and you don't really need to sleep properly, and you still can function. But what your body needs is rest. So the first thing I tell people is, stop worrying about the bloody sleep, man. Worry about rest. Just get into bed and say you're resting. This is cool, because your body can't function without rest. But you can power nap quite happily. And we all knew that. You're asleep in the bush, and just where the tone of the crickets would change, or something would happen, the frogs would maybe stop croaking, something's out there. And you knew straight away, even though you've been dozing. And, that's just the thing that you've got to realize, that you can function without a lot of sleep, and people don't need a lot of sleep. Because paradoxically, it's a funny thing. If you worry about sleep, it stops you sleeping. It's one of those stupid things in our brains. I don't know why that happens. People who worry about sleep badly. So if you stop worrying about sleep, it's one of the first things you've got to do is to sleep better, is stop, just ignore it. Then obviously there's other techniques you can do to relax before bed. You know, we tell people, you know, don't drink too much alcohol, don't have caffeine after 4. Be aware of your circadian rhythms, which are the biological rhythms, which means that you get into bed the same time and you get out of bed the same time, no matter what, if it's weekend, public holiday, whatever. You've got to try and tell your body clock, that's when I want to sleep or be resting, because the biological rhythms and the hormones in your body will go into that rhythm naturally. And you know, you've just moved to the Philippines, and you know full well that when you're in a different time zone, it only takes you 3 days and you've got into that new time zone. So you can bugger up your normal time zone very quickly if you stay up late 3 or 4 days in a row. You're telling your body you're working night shift. Okay, so it's really important to try and remember those rhythms are really important for you. And I'm not I don't like giving medication for sleep. It's just melatonin may help, but you don't use it in big doses. But at least you don't get hooked on it. All the other bloody stuff, Allin, temazepam, Stilnox, all those drugs, you'll get tolerant to them over time, and you know it means it doesn't work as well, and you need more to make you sleep. So they're awful. You should actually, if you use them, only use them sparingly. So you'd be off them more than you're on them. Anyway, so those are just a few little tricks. Just in closing, John, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. You know, I found a lot of negatives that I got out of the army, and I wasted a few years of my life, and I felt like that because I just wanted to become a doctor, and it left me with some battle scars, and I lost one of my best mates. You know, I'd sent you that photo of Tony Brackus's truck. You know, Tony was my best mate in the army, and he got shot by an RPG, and he passed away. I think he was only 19 years old, and the bloody regulars left the truck up there against the fence in the barracks at 3 Indep for months on end. You know, they don't realize how much that impacted on me. I was so upset about that. Every time I looked at that truck, I thought of Tony, and it really knocked me around. And that, you know, they just left it there, and eventually they towed it away. But, you know, we knew 2 of our mates had been killed in that, and it wasn't a good thing. And, you know, so there were a few things that I got scarred with there, and I really, but I came out with some good stuff as well, you know, and I want to really focus on the positives here. You know, the military helped me, and my boarding school experience helped me to have really good self-discipline, you know, trust in myself, belief in myself. I can do anything if I put my mind to it. I also learned to work hard, and I've got a really good, I think most Rhodesians are like this, we're very good workers. And you know, and I had pride in my country, and I've still got pride in my country. And this, I'm in my man cave at home here, and I've got all the Rhodesian books here. I've got a 20 mil round. I've got an armored car shell. I've got a mortar bomb from a smoke one, you know, because obviously the frag ones would just blow up. But I've got the fin of a smoke bomb. And I've got all my Rhodesian books. I've got lots of Rhodesian books now, and the Rhodesian flag. And I'm proud to call myself Rhodesian. And I think we all need to be proud of that. Anyone who served for Rhodesia, and even those who didn't serve, that we all were part of a beautiful country, and we need to be proud of that. And you know, I'm Australian now, and I love Australia, and I'd fight for Australia if I had to. But I can tell you, in my heart, I'm a Rhodesian. I'm always going to be a Rhodesian. Okay, thanks, John. That's all I had to say, and I hope that was interesting to people.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Paul, thanks. I think you left out something. Maybe I wasn't listening carefully enough, but did you talk about the Troutbeck contact and the capture?
Yeah. That was a funny one. Yeah, there were two funny stories I wanted to talk about at 3 Indep, and I probably passed over them. But the first one was we had this one contact where the chopper got shot, the main rotor blade got around through it. And I was always quite surprised. It's got to be quite unlucky to get that. And this chopper, they could hardly fly it. It was vibrating, and eventually they dropped it off back at the camp. And it just so happened that there was the Starlight Fangs, as we call them. You know, the dentist was there doing the dental checks, and he was a short, rotund guy. And it was the funniest sight actually, because he went and they said, "Can you just patch this hole up in this main rotor blade?" You know, and so they perched him. He got on a drum of avgas, And he was a short little bloke, and they hauled him up there and put him up there, and he got all this amalgam and he mixed it up and he patched up this bloody water blade. Anyway, they gave it a go, but the thing was still, they couldn't fly the chopper. It was still vibrating like hell, and so they had to fly a whole new set of balanced rotor blades out there. But we just watched this from the distance. It was so funny. And another story about this crazy war in Rhodesia, which I wanted to say, is one of the contacts we were in at 3 Indep, the Troutbeck contact, we killed 18 that day. What happened was every time they came back to camp to refuel the choppers, they took more of us out there. And so even though I wasn't in the stick that initiated the contact, I was taken out there as one of the stop groups. And they dumped us, I think it was Major Fondell, I think his name was. He was the Captain Fondell. He was the Sunray. And he blocked all these areas that we basically just about got everybody. But we got a capture there, and this guy had a flesh wound. He had it through the thigh, and he couldn't walk well, and we had to really help him get around. Anyway, so we were waiting. He was going to get uplifted with one of the choppers, and with all, and they were taking all the bodies out as well. The SB had them, and so one of the RLI guys he was one of the Fire Force blokes, and they were from Grand Reef. And he was just chatting to this bloke and sort of interrogating him, but quite aggressively, how did you become a gook and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, and it turns out the guy turned out to be a waiter at the George Hotel. And boy, my eyes lit up, because that was my favorite watering hole. And, and I'm listening to this bloke talking, and I thought, geez, he's bloody served me beers, this bloke. And here we are now in the war. And I thought, geez, this is a strange war. It was the craziest thing that ever happened. I thought, man, this is how stupid that war was at times, wasn't it? I mean, they got recruited, and he'd been a waiter, and he almost certainly served me beer. So, and then we were fighting each other.
Like the World War II, thing of loose lips sink ships, Yeah. You never know who's listening, But
that was a funny story, though.
I've really enjoyed your talk today. Thank you so much for reaching out to me, and thank you so much for sharing with us, brother. I think it's very relevant, and touching on the PTSD thing as well. And yeah, I really enjoyed today. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show. I'll certainly know hero, and I really have enjoyed what you have done, and hearing some of what the antics some of the guys got up to, I think it's been fantastic, and it's just a pleasure to have it recorded for posterity.
Absolutely.
So thanks to you and to Johan as well.
Yeah, thanks Paul, appreciate that.
All the best then. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah.